So welcome everyone to another weekly session of the Embodied Underground here in rainy Berkeley. It's November 1st, 2022, while in Sydney, it's already November 2nd. So good morning, Australia. I appreciate it's a rather early morning there. We're discussing today a paper by McArthur, Mingon, and John Sutton of the Department of Cognitive Science at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. The paper appeared last year, 2021, in Synthese, which is a Springer Nature peer-reviewed journal as part of a journal theme or special issue, perhaps, called Minds in Skills Performances. I thought I would just begin by saying a few words about this quite extraordinary paper, which contributes to imbuing the embodiment paradigm with cultural, historical, humanistic perspectives. Many among us here are in the business of designing technological artifacts to enhance the enculturation of young students into linguistic, scientific, mathematical, and other practices. My personal fascination with this paper is in how it surfaces implicit axiological assumptions inherent in the best-intentioned development of technology. And so I'd like to open the session by quoting the French philosopher Gilbert Simondon from his 1958 book Du mode d'existence des objets techniques, translated as On the Mode of Existence of Technical Objects. And he writes the following: recognition of the modes of existence of technical objects must be brought about through philosophical consideration. What philosophy has to achieve in this respect is analogous to what the abolition of slavery achieved in affirming the worth of the individual human being. And so, as an aspiring fellow human being, I salute the authors for their efforts indeed to affirm the worth of the individual human being and community. And the Embodied Underground itself is a community, not a lecture by any means. And everyone who's here today have already read your paper. So let's begin with a quick round of introductions so we know who's here today. And then we'll turn the virtual floor over to Mac and John. So maybe we'll begin with just quickly Raul, and then Sher, and then Zach. Just say hi or where you're coming from so everyone knows who you are.
So, hi there, I'm Raul Sanchez, coming from sports science in Madrid, and I'm really interested in social dimension and skill learning and skill acquisition. And yeah, for me, the topic of the paper was in some sense fascinating, but I mean, yeah, because the social and the cultural, it's in the surroundings all the time. So yeah, for me, it's really interesting. So.
Thank you, Raul. Thank you. Over, please, to Sher Baz, then Zach, then Amina.
Yes, thank you. I'm from Pakistan, Sher Baz. My area of interest is mathematics and teaching mathematics by using 3D computer models and augmented reality and 3D sound. And by combining these environment, what I want to do is to deliver the mathematical concepts in by using the special ability of the students or learners. So this is what I am. Thanks.
Thank you. The spatial abilities, yeah, the special spatial abilities. So over, please, to Zach, then Amina, and then Corey, please.
Hi, I'm Zach. I'm here in Berkeley, California. I'm a retired academic physician in physical medicine and rehabilitation, and I teach contact improvisation dance and practice it. When I was in college, I belonged to an ultimate Frisbee team, and we had a performance ritual involving movement and a lot of shouting before every tournament, before every match.
Wonderful. Over, please, to Amina, then Corey, then Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amina. I'm joining from Abu Dhabi, which is where I'm doing my last year of undergrad in interactive media, which is human-computer interaction. And on the topic of the paper, I've actually taken a class called Performing Robots in the fall of 2021. And we did Snow White with robots as actors. So I'm really excited to discuss the topic today.
Yeah, welcome back, Amina. And if you want to text your professor, Shiloh, you can join us and discuss robotics. So over please to Corey. I understand you also have a paper just out, very much related to the issue. So Corey and then Mark and Jacqueline.
Yeah, I'm Corey Brady. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, in the middle of the US. And my research area is on often on collective computational modeling in mathematics in particular. Usually the collective is an emergent kind of thing for me rather than a kind of culturally situated traditional piece. And but the paper that Dor is talking about is talking about helping students to begin doing computational or doing computer programming by doing emergent choreographies in the dance space. But the emphasis being on found resonances rather than culturally founded resonances changes a whole bunch about it. So I'm excited to see this perspective.
Thanks, Corinne. Welcome to the Embodied Underground. Over to, please, to Mark, then Jacqueline, then Franz.
Folks, I'm Mark from Pretoria, South Africa. I'm a bass player and composer, and keenly interested in this paper because of my work with ensembles of all shapes and sizes, mostly improvising in the jazz field. And so I'm very interested in the dynamics of indigenous knowledge, and everything about this paper is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Welcome back, Mark. Over please to Jacqueline, then Franz, and then Zuzanna and Andrzej.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jacqueline. I'm a doctoral student at Berkeley, interested in inclusion and special education, but also math learning.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Over to Franz, and then Zuzanna and Andrzej, and then David, please.
I'm Franz from Germany, close to Berlin. I'm very much interested in mind and movement as the core of human existence, as the core of human existence, maybe mind as movement. And here dance is particularly interesting because it connects a biological movement with the highest movement of culture in one. And so, and I'm fascinated, I have to say this always when it comes to dance, by the idea of Merlin Donald, who says that there was a culture before language which was communicative, very communicative and social, and lived largely from dance.
Thank you, Franz. Welcome back. Over, please, to Zuzanna and Andrzej. You can decide who's first. Then David, then Catherine, please.
Hi, my name is Zuzanna. I'm from Poland, and I'm a dancer and choreographer. And right now I also study a PhD from choreography.
And my name is Andrzej. I work in Copernicus Science Center in Poland, in Warsaw, in the physics lab, where we design and conduct classes for students. I'm also a somatic educator connected with body-mind centering method.
Welcome back, both of you. Over, please, to David, then Catherine, then Veronica.
David House. I'm at the Center for Sensory Studies in Montreal. I don't dance, but I'm here anyway. I'm going to try to follow.
Thanks, David. We welcome you anyway. Over, please, to Catherine, Veronica, then Julian. Catherine, you're muted.
I muted, didn't I? Okay, sorry. Obviously not a techie, but this will be interesting. So I'm a folklorist, phenomenologist, and gesture analyst, and I'm working at the moment on affecting gestures, on affect theory and body movement. So I'm really interested to discuss some of the material that you guys have brought up here.
Thank you, Catherine. Over please to Veronica, and then Julian, then Eli.
Yes, hello. My name is Veronica Meyerbeck. I'm a rare guest because we have today a holiday here, so I can finally participate once. I'm from Vienna. I'm an architect and a former dancer, ended up in lighting design and currently studying cognitive science and neuroscience, having a strong interest in embodied design and also embodied principles in education.
Welcome. Over please to Julian, then Eli, then Jorge.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julian. I'm a third-year PhD student in math education and at UC Berkeley and also part of Dor's lab. Mainly interested at the moment in diagrammatic reasoning and in exploring and developing microphenomenological methods to study diagrammatic reasoning. And it's good to be here.
You're just back. You and Eli just back from Paris. Over to Eli, please. And then Jorge. And then I see both Ratih and Cristian have their images on. So why don't you write to me in the chat just to let me know if you're going to speak up. Please go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, great. Hey, everybody. My name is Eli, second-year master's student in the Embodied Design Research Lab at Berkeley. My research is involving clay in mathematical reasoning and looking at the transmodal aspects of our sense-making in math learning.
Great, thanks, Eli. Over, please, to Jorge, and then perhaps Ratih and Cristian. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I am Jorge. I am a mathematician at the University of Chile in Santiago, and I am interested also in systems biology and biological approach to cognition and the learning of mathematics related to movement, enactive metaphorization, and the like. And also very interested in the interplay between dance and learning and mathematics, especially dance from a non-Eurocentric viewpoint. So thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. I will read Ratih's introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Ratih, student in Berkeley. Academically and professionally, I trained in the field of mathematics education, while informally, I also grew up as a Balinese dancer. My experiences inspired me to bridge those two fields through embodied cognition framework. Where are we? How to support a dancer to refine and evaluate their movement by using math discourses, and how to learn mathematics through dance movement. And okay, welcome back, Ratih. Cristian will not speak up. He's got a bout of COVID, but he's listening in. So with that, I believe, so welcome, Cristian, be well. Oh, thank you. Simon, thank you for waving there. I'm kind of meandering through the crowd. Please pick up, Simon. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here, as always. I'm a professor at UCI in Los Angeles. I'm an artist. And in the early 90s, I built a dancing robot. I will present I'll put up a link to the page of that. So and I've been quite actively involved in a kind of critique of computational and robotics discourses for most of my career. So really keen to dig into this subject from a number of different directions. Really happy to see John here today and looking forward to the conversation.
Okay, thank you. I just see one more person popped up, another John Kim. Would you just like to say hi to the crowd, and then we'll dive in.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is John Kim. I'm a second-year PhD student in Dor's lab. My area of interest consists of human-computer interaction and language acquisition. So thank you so much.
Okay, with that, I believe, yeah, okay, no protest. I guess it's everyone. So we'll turn over, please, to Mac and John. And we often, even just for the benefit of the young and emerging scholars, maybe you can start by saying, like, why Haka? Where are you coming from? How does this fit into a bigger, career-long or research program, or yeah, what brings you here?
Great, thanks, Dor. Yeah, well, what we plan to do is kind of start big and come in to answer that question. So I'm going to speak just briefly for 10 minutes max, and then I'll hand over to Mac, who's going to give you a lot more of the background to this specific project. We've both got some slides. Just to say up front before I share my screen, thank you so much for inviting us. The couple of sessions I've been able to attend so far have been a joy. What a great group of people you've got. Really keen to hear everything that the group has to say about this tonight. And also just to say how much pleasure and provocation I've had from working with Mac, who I'll hand over to in a moment. So Mac is in the very final phases of his PhD write-up at the hard, gritty end. So any input you can give him will be really, really helpful. He came to me coming down from Queensland to Sydney a few years ago with a whole array of possible plans for working between psychology, philosophy, and anthropology and the social sciences. This is where he's ended up. And he'll explain more about the origin of the project. But what I wanted to do in my few minutes is actually, I guess, thinking about this and speaking to your group made me very acutely aware of how this project with Mac has kind of crystallized and takes forward kind of everything that my research has always been about. So what I thought I'd do is because there's a lot of people who don't know me, I'll just sort of whiz through a few different pieces of background in the work I and my collaborators have done over the years to sort of show how we get here. So let me share my screen now. And can you see that okay, everybody?
Yes.
Great. So I'm in Paris right now. It's been a public holiday today for All Saints Day. I've been wandering around. The spot down at the bottom right there is my current work spot, the Institute for Advanced Studies on the Ile Saint-Louis, which is an amazing place to have a fellowship for a year. I mean, it's partly a sad story in that the Department of Cognitive Science, from where we wrote this paper in 2021, no longer exists. There isn't one there for us to be part of doing this kind of cross-disciplinary work, but that's another story. So yeah, I'm gonna just quickly go through 4 different bits of background. I'm gonna put a couple of papers up just as sort of anchor points. You can find all my papers on my website there, johnsutton.net, if interested. And I hope you'll see how what's in this paper kind of pulls together and kind of applies. I hope renders real in many ways some of these themes that I've been working on for a long, long time. So I'll talk very briefly about these 4 themes: distributed cognitive ecologies, collaborative or social remembering, skill and expertise, which is, I guess, the most direct or immediate background to this project, and then historical cognitive science, I guess. So distributed cognitive ecologies. So the background to all of my work is a kind of 4E or 8E, maybe adding ecological, emotional, evolutionary, empathetic. Distributed is a kind of better word nowadays, I think, because it doesn't have the implication of the word extended. I think maybe Richard Minari was talking about this before, of thinking that there's something prior inside, which is then extended outwards into the world. So the unit of analysis in the Hutchins-style distributed cognitive ecologies framework is always greater than the individual, and we then look down and pull particular threads across a heterogeneous array of resources. There are neural and affective and bodily resources, social resources, technological resources, environmental resources, and this project brings a lot of those into play. And over the years, I guess I've been looking for ways to make this approach and 4E cognition in general make a difference. Now some of us have tried to do that with regard to the mainstream cognitive sciences. I'll say something about that in a minute. But here, what we're also trying to do is kind of get out of the philosophy of cognition, get out of cognitive science and make a difference out to the political world, the moral world, the cultural world. And so there's an urge, I think a lot of people share, to look for a more critical edge to 4E cognitive theory. And this paper just starts to do that, looking on the one hand in critical mode at some of the the pernicious, the violent, the disruptive effects of false ideas about mind and body and skill, and how those have influenced and fed into colonial practices, right? But also, I guess, much more importantly, the constructive project of looking to indigenous psychologies, in this case to Maori epistemology, Maori ontology, Maori practice, as one source for trying to live a better world. Second, one of the ways in which we've tried to apply those very abstract frameworks is to try and pull apart the cognitive psychology of memory from the inside out. So very, very roughly, it's been a long-standing default assumption that other people are bad for your memory. But this is why witnesses in most legal systems are not allowed to talk to each other before they appear in court. It's assumed that because memory is malleable, because it's constructive, because it can blend and generalize and interfere, that the best memory system is one that's kind of completely shielded, cut off from the social world. And we've just thought that's wrong from the start. And so we found experimental evidence for that, looking at a tradition of collaborative recall experiments, especially working with people who have a long shared history, who know each other, who can divide the cognitive labor and the social labor. For example, older couples who have lived together for many years and who have a deep, emotionally embedded way of remembering their shared past together. Now, that's also obviously influencing this paper, where there are groups of people. Sometimes they know each other well, sometimes they don't, but often there's a very specific social and cultural group here who are performing the past together and recreating the past in action. Third, as I said, this is the most direct ancestor of this project. Matt came down to join our cognitive ecologies group, working on skill and expertise on mindful bodies in action. This book has just come out earlier this year, edited by my colleague Kath Bicknell and myself on collaborative embodied performance ecologies of skill. If you're interested in performance and cognitive theory, this, I hope, will interest you. It's still only in hardback, but I'm happy to send some chapters of preprints to anybody who's interested. It should be out in paperback next year. So that's a sort of a joint statement of a lot of work we've done on the nature of mindful embodied action, mindful intelligence in action. I guess we're countering a lot of ideas in kind of lore, in practitioners' lore, that the body takes over, in phenomenological philosophy, that cognition and thinking is inevitably a bad thing or stops you being expert. And also in a lot of areas of psychology, where the idea is that you proceduralize or you automate your embodied skills as you gain expertise. So we've, at a whole array of different levels, from cognitive theory through to a lot of practical applied studies, tried to show various different ways in which thinking on your feet, right, thinking in action is really thinking. Right, it's not letting the body take over. That's to reinstate the dualism that we were trying to avoid. Right, we have to feel our way in action, using everything at our disposal, everything at our cognitive disposal, our emotional disposal, our environments and social worlds as well. So it's a theory of meshed control, that the world out there, the cues that we've set up, our colleagues and people, and our bodily and cognitive systems are operating together to allow for the kind of online dynamic adjustment to the challenges that expert performance requires. And again, at the highest levels, as you'll see, and as Mac will talk about, Haka performance is incredibly difficult. He may talk about this directly. It requires extraordinary levels of expertise at a whole array of levels, from technical prowess to joint action of the highest caliber. Fourthly, historical and cultural cognitive theories. This is sort of where I started. My first degree was in classics way back. So I'm an old humanities person because before I became a cog scientist. And I've continued to work, I guess, in the cognitive humanities, looking at a history of philosophy and history of science, but also the history of literature, music, dance, and performance. And the whole point there was to try to make cognitive science sort of spill out of the lab and tell the rest of the world things they might be interested in. Both in terms of the historical background to where we find ourselves today in relation to social and cultural challenges, to environmental challenges, but also to try and find the pleasure of applied, case study work, where anthropologists and sociologists might one day love and need and embrace cognitive theory, if cognitive theory can be a little bit more lively than it's often been in the past. So that's what we're trying to approximate. I'm going to hand over to Mac in a minute to talk you through the paper. I just want to say, two things. Mac's going to talk a lot about the sort of memory-related aspect of this project, about the cultural transmission of shared memories. In the paper, as you've seen, there are also extended discussions of synchrony and joint action, and of situated affect, of situated emotion, and we'd be really keen to hear more from you about what you made of those parts of it. This is just 4 points where we're trying to take these ideas further in further work. Some of this is already in Mac's full PhD, which he'll be happy to talk about, but some of this I hope he's going to be able to get around to working on once he's done. As I mentioned, trying to develop a much more politically engaged approach to cognitive theory, in this case with a very specific cultural history in place. We're very keen to get your take on the robotics, on what we might have missed in terms of more interesting culturally embedded work in human-computer interaction and robotics. In the paper we just mentioned one point, of course, that robots' bodies in the real world do themselves have histories and need to be understood as specific bodies with specific learning over their past. I'm working now, my fellowship here in Paris is on place and memory. And I guess this is very much present in the paper already, but I'm hoping to take the Haka case and Maori culture further as a very unique example of the specific role of place as not just a kind of trigger to memory, not just a cue, like when going back to a place brings certain things in your past to mind, but actually places are sometimes partly constituting your memories. So what does that mean? What's the nature of deep place knowledge about when people are so at embodied ease with their world? It can be in an urban ecology as well as in a landscape environment as well. What kind of knowledge is that, and how can we study it? And of course, then I hope that we're going to be able to do more direct work across a whole array of levels, perhaps some experimental work as well as ethnographic work on Haka itself. And Mac and I will be really keen to hear ideas about what particular features of this extraordinary, unique cultural practice might be worth exploring further. So that's more than enough from me. I will stop sharing and let Mac take over.
Thanks so much, John.
Okay, can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so kia ora everyone. G'day from Australia. Thanks for starting us off, John, and thanks to Dor and the organisers for inviting us here to discuss our robot paper. So I am Mac Mingon. I'm zooming in from Wednesday morning down here in Sydney, Australia. I am Australian and I'm also Māori. I come from Ngāi Tūhoi, which is a tribe from the North Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I am currently approaching the final stage of my PhD and the write-up of my dissertation on the cognitive ecology of the Māori Haka. So most people are familiar with the Haka through its presence in rugby, but sport is just one of many contexts in which Haka are performed today, of course. You may have seen one performed at a pōwhiri, which is a welcome ceremony, perhaps at a wedding or a birthday, maybe a graduation or a celebration of some kind, maybe even at a protest. So the Haka is not just a traditional war dance performed to intimidate. It is a diverse performance practice which has many different forms and functions. Physically expressive and synchronous actions are employed to align the intentions and arouse the emotions of performers so that they can convey in an unbridled fullness the message of each composition. So the meaning of a given performance of Haka is contingent on this dynamic execution of an ecology of skilled actions, chanting, and coordinated movements, which all have deep roots in the ancestral past and which cultivate widespread connections throughout the Māori world. So in broad terms, my PhD project has aimed to explore the psychology, particularly its cognitive, affective, and its epistemic aspects. So I'm interested in the kinds of contact with the past that are enabled through the collaborative embodied skills enacted in Haka, and in the memory processes and dynamics which underpin them. And so my research has been based in the Māori community here in Sydney, Australia, aided by the closures that came along with COVID. So this has included fieldwork here, where I've been a member of a Kapa Haka group, which is a cultural performance group, and have participated and performed in a national competition here. And it also led to the article with John, in which we respond to a project that proposed the use of robots as digital preservationists for intangible cultural heritage, using Haka as their test case. Okay, so in the article, we work through the challenge of the robot Haka proposal. We clarify some misconceptions about Haka and then focus on some specific aspects of Haka, which kind of complicate the translation or the transformation of the practice from humans to robots. We discuss the significance of synchronized actions, the affective dimensions of Haka, and the kinds of remembering that are cultivated through performance. By contrasting the robot's performance with the human practice, generated a rich opportunity to examine the kinds of thinking and feeling that are embodied in a skilled Haka performance. And so we used the robot Haka, the case of it, the proposal, to address questions about the nature of skill and the preservation of embodied knowledge repertoires. Also questions about the kinds of cognitive and affective experiences that are cultivated in indigenous practices like Haka, and questions about the role of robots in the archival aspirations of human societies. And so, of course, I won't have time to cover everything in detail in the next few minutes. So I'll just aim to provide some context to the robot Haka proposal, briefly discuss and clarify Haka, and then point out some areas where we think the robots will fall short. So there's actually a bit of a history of robots being made to Haka, which traces back to at least 2006 with Ani, the humanoid robot there. There were others in 2008 and 2010. But then in 2016, a team from the HIT Lab and NYUAD stepped things up a gear when they programmed their now humanoid robots to perform a Haka. These performances were used to prompt a research proposal where robots were to be digital repositories of intangible cultural heritage, robots as cultural preservationists. And so I'll let their video speak for itself. Their description is that robots could be useful in order to preserve important cultural human material. We feel a deep love and respect for the Māori traditions. We want to contribute to their preservation of this cultural heritage. Using our expertise in social robotics, we program the now robots in order to display the Māori Haka. We hope that people can know and appreciate the value of New Zealand's culture through robots too. And this video won the first place in the best video competition in the International Conference of Human Robot Interaction 2016. So I'll just optimize for video quickly and then play this.
The Haka is a traditional ancestral war cry from the Maori people of New Zealand. They were typically performed by warriors to proclaim their strength in order to intimidate their enemies. The tradition of New Zealand sports teams performing a Haka kamate before the international matches began in 1888. It has helped spread the Haka more widely known worldwide. The most famous feats are by the All Blacks rugby team, and we have adapted our demo from one of their performances. We hope that this demonstration of the Now robots performing the Haka would open the doors for researchers who wish to utilize robots in cultural preservation.
All right. So the robot Māori Haka, it presents a challenge. Can the robot's programming and performance adequately reflect the human practice in ways that preserve intangible culture? Of course, one way of arguing against the proposal would be to simply point out that limitations of the current robots, the fact that they don't have a mouth so they can't chant, and that the postures and the actions are all a bit off, that their performance just isn't very convincing. But by looking past these current limitations and going along with the proposal for a moment, there are some deeper points to make. The robotic representation of these complex sequences of postures and actions may be extraordinarily difficult, but we asked if the project misconceives the cultural practice more profoundly by treating Haka as merely physical performance. And furthermore, whether oversimplifying the psychological significance of the practice undermines the goal of preserving it as intangible cultural heritage. Reproducing Haka, we suggest, requires much more than copying physical actions, and preserving the intangible entails more than programming postures and movements. So to start with, let's consider what Haka actually is. As explained by Valence Smith, Haka is a genre of waiata, which is a song or a chant, which conveys a kaupapa, a message that is ignited by the ka, the spark or fire, and fueled by the ha, the breath, which is the actualization of modi, life force. So Haka literally translates as the lit breath or the fiery breath. To perform Haka is to breathe fire to a message through an expression of modi, which is this life force which animates and binds all things in the physical world. Of course, the breath has long been associated with spiritual and energetic matters. The ancient Greek word pneuma, the Latin term spiritus, they both mean breath and spirits and are implicated in concepts of a life force. Different cultures have developed breathing techniques and practices to help cultivate different qualities of mind and health and connection. For example, the Indian yogic practice, pranayama, involves the manipulation of the breath and the body to cultivate and expand prana, a Sanskrit word which means both breath and life force. Another example is Qigong, a form of movement and meditation which originates in ancient China. So the practice involves coordinated movements and breath aimed at cultivating and balancing qi, a term which means breath or air, but also refers to a metaphysical concept of a vital energy. And so the transformative effects of breathing are well known. Breathing has additional functions besides just the regulation of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the body. Breathing influences homeostatic functions, the circulatory system. It plays a key role in chemical regulation and metabolism, and it also affects motor control and postural stability. Breathing forms a bridge between the voluntary and autonomic nervous systems and is intimately connected with mental dynamics. So it has psychophysiological effects. Stress and anxiety are linked with respiratory patterns. Pain and mood management are connected too. Focus, attention, and general psychomotor function are also affected by breathing, for better or for worse. And so the breath is an essential aspect of Haka, which I'm drawing attention to here because it is just one way of appreciating the potency of the practice to affect experience. In addition to the outward-facing aspects of the performance, which can be observed and appreciated by an audience, there are the inward aspects of the physiology and psychology and of modi and mana, which are cultivated by the performer. And all of this, of course, is missing in the case of the robots. So the content and forms of each Haka composition are another aspect to consider. Haka are composed for all kinds of reasons, both grand and small, as they can be inspired by all kinds of events and experiences. Haka that are connected or composed about significant events in history provide potent sources of information and connection with people and places which can persist across time. Haka helps bring the past into the present in a really visceral way, which makes it a potent part of commemorative services and ceremonies. Haka can hold histories and stories, and so their performance is a continuation of the breath which inspired them. In Haka, words and actions are mutually reinforcing, such as the intended message of each performance may be conveyed in a fullness beyond mere verbal expression. As Māori scholar Nathan Matthews explains, Haka are composed in a way that ensures that performers understand the meaning contained in the composition and subsequently allows the performers to resonate this meaning through physical performance. Complete understanding of the message contained in the Haka can only be obtained by understanding the significance of the word and culture and by having appropriate actions arranged and performed to reinforce those words. There should be a fierceness of action in the Haka, punctuated by appropriate actions by the individual performer to express his own personality. So the effectiveness of a given performance is determined by the appropriate expressiveness of actions in a specific performance context. In Haka, full effort and energy are expected of all performers in every instance. Even when the message being expressed is a peaceful one, the actions must still be convey the requisite heartiness and sincerity, so they must be crisp and decisive and purposeful. And these features of Haka are fostered by socio-cultural expectations of active participation by all performers and an acknowledged criteria for an effective performance, which leaves no room for lackluster efforts. Haka practitioners use their entire bodies to tell their stories and deliver their message. The distinctive movements and language employed in Haka anchor the art form to the ancestral past. So performing Haka provides practitioners with a potent source of connection with each other, with the audience, with their ancestors, as well as with the environment. And this performance ecology is essentially interactional or relational, with the uptake or reception being an intrinsic component of the performance event. And this ecology is conceptualized, clarified through the interrelated concepts of ihi, wehi, and wana. So again, by Matthews, ihi is a psychic power that elicits a positive psychic and emotional response from the audience. The response is referred to as wehi, which is a reaction to the power of the performance. And wana is the condition created by the combination of the elicitation of ihi and the reaction of wehi during performance. It is the aura that occurs during the performance and which encompasses both the performers and the audience. So these features have distinct phenomenological profiles relating to their visceral effects. For example, wehi is often associated with feeling a shiver going down the spine, with hair standing on end, or feeling the urge to cry. And so let's now return to the contrast with the robots. The robot's Haka does not involve an inwardly felt and an outwardly expressed array of emotional experiences. But such experiences are central to determining the how and why of particular performances. Each performance of the same Haka is a unique event in itself, and each performance is a psychological intervention by, for, and on the performer, the group, and the audience. Contrast this with the nursery rhyme and the accompanying actions. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Robots could be programmed to reproduce the rhyme with the appropriate actions and could foreseeably demonstrate this activity more or less successfully with a participating audience of human children. And for this activity, the robot does not need to possess emotions or the introspective ability to know what it is feeling in order to deliver a genuine expression of the rhyme. The robot just needs to repeat what it has been programmed to do and say, and to do so clearly and comprehensibly, as the participating children will do the feeling and the knowing. And this kind of robot performance, it may be useful in a whole suite of practical activities when robots could be worthwhile interaction partners as tools or as prompts to human action. However, the robot Haka proposal is more ambitious than this. And as I've indicated, Haka is a bit more complicated than that. Rather than being a one-way performance activity from performer to audience, or even a call and response activity like the nursery rhyme example, Haka is a conversation in which the audience is explicitly involved. And the language of this conversation is multimodal. It is involving speech and gesture, and the performance context provides crucial information about the content or message of each performance. Ihi, wehi, and wana are concepts which describe the energetic exchanges that are achieved in this kind of conversation. In order for the robot to take part in such a conversation, not only would their skilled bodily performance have to be convincing, but they would need to be responsive to that unique configuration of each performance context, as well as the affective reaction of the audience. So robots would need a reason to Haka. It would have to resolve something, achieve something in a specific context. Haka is a dynamic practice. It is not a static dance akin to the choreographed performances that may accompany popular songs. So the proposal to use robots as cultural preservationists is a bit more ambitious than just a digitized library. It proposes that the robotic Haka could be sufficient to preserve the intangible aspects of multicultural knowledge that are implicit in Haka performance. And this proposal mistakes Haka for mere movement which can be replicated and words that can be recorded. And so we have argued that the robot's performance cannot embody or transmit intangible cultural heritage in the same ways that enculturated human learning and performance can. There still may be roles for robots in the archival aspirations of human societies, but this role won't be in replicating the complex suite of activities that constitute our most culturally elaborate forms of communion. Haka is a living art form, which has had an important role in the preservation and revitalization of multicultural heritage, both tangible and intangible. So Haka function as commemorative vehicles, as a means of engaging with cultural history in the present. Although the specific message of a given Haka may be directed at a local political event or a context, the practice itself, through its physicality and forms, reignites the multi-forms of the past and commemorates their place in the present. And so the multi-past is embodied in Haka, and in this way it persists, it's preserved in the performers and their refined abilities, in the physical and lyrical forms of the practice, and in the recursive exhibition of cultural concepts, genealogy, and philosophy that are embedded in the formal and structural features of the practice. So if you're interested in learning more about Haka, I would encourage you to check out Māori Television and Te Maratini Kapa Haka Festival, which is currently celebrating its 50th anniversary. And there are many examples and performances to watch, which will give you an indication of the variety and potency of Haka today, much more so than the robots performance will. I also have some examples of clips to show you if we have the time and people are interested. Otherwise, I would direct you to MāoriTelevision.com and Te Ao Haka, which is the Haka world. And that's all I have to say for the moment. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and thanks for your interest.
Thanks so very much, Mac, for that introduction and just bringing it all together. Even though we've all read the paper, it's really useful in also seeing you in person with your ihi, got it right, coming through in advocating for preserving Haka as it is, and embodied and enacted by humans. This is a time where we can open the floor to comments, questions, and you can, use your electronic hand or your flesh and blood hand, and go forward. We usually give students priority, at least in the first half hour or so, but open to anything anyone wishes to ask, comment, thoughts that come up, associations, support, challenge. If not, I might just throw something out there. And when we see those robots, in particular juxtaposed with the human performance, they do seem like a mere like a ludicrous simulacra of the thing itself. And yet I wonder if there's something here in the argument of the paper that is a bit it's a bit going towards the issue of the mode, the semiotic mode in which the dance is preserved. I just imagine, like, I'm thinking when say Homer first wrote down the Odyssey and the Iliad, right, attributed to him. I just wonder, I just don't know, but if anybody said, oh my gosh, now it's written down and they've lost, it'll be like lost forever, the true spirit, or rather where people say, yes, now finally we have our little cheat sheets here, so we can do the actual oratory performance, but just using that, right? Or I'm thinking of people like, you know, like the Brothers Grimm, who wrote down the legends of Europe, or musicians, musicologists like Kodai or Bela Bartok, and those who were preserving the music of the Roma people and others. Like, I don't know if there were critiques at the time of, oh no, you've put that in scores, and now you really think that's all there is to it? Or rather, were people saying, oh yes, now we can partake and get to know, we can get to know this. So I'm just imagining if somebody, instead of having robots perform it, rather use the Laban or Batnev or some kind of system to write out the choreography, and we saw it on paper, and we said, oh, okay, great, now we have this and we can learn from that how to perform. If there was less, if there had been less of a critique from you folks, if there's something about the uncanny or not so uncanny valley there, that of the, you know, there's something of a bit of a pathetic in seeing those robots, those mechanistic actions, which makes the whole thing seem so naive, the whole project. So I guess my question is, how much of your argument is due to the specific semiotic mode in which the culture is the pretense is that they are preserving culture?
I can jump in quickly, John. Thanks, Dor. There's great stuff in there. And something I've been thinking about a lot lately, as I've been working on a particular chapter about commemoration, is these kinds of transformations that happen between modes of expression, whether it's, you know, the epic poems that were spoken very much as a sort of communal activity around campfires, and the transformations that happen when you convert those to text, and the sort of loss of control that happens with the engagement with those materials that is provided by, you know, books that escape you. And so in the context of Māori, it's a oral tradition. There's all kinds of practices that are conducted to preserve history and cultural lore and knowledge. And Haka very much sort of ties in and connects with all of them. And so I think with this Haka robot proposal, it's that the preservation claim or aspect was very much problematic in that what is being preserved through the translation of, whether we call it a dance or you know, a cultural performance, into a mode of pure audience, right? Because the robots become a show that presents rather than a mode of participation and engagement with the cultural knowledge. So that's why Haka is unlike sort of choreographed dances which merely present or tell a story. The real potency of Haka is through the development of skill. So for instance, I could all show you some YouTube videos of that Kamate Haka. There are plenty out there which are, you know, describing the actions and the words, and we could all in the next, you know, hour somewhat learn the words, you know, learn the actions, and we could get a bit of a Haka going. And that would be one way of sort of learning and engaging with that story, that because the Kamate Haka is a particular story written by a particular person in the 1820s. and you will get some kind of engagement and knowledge of it. But if you to perform that same haka 100, 200, 300 times, to really develop and embody the actions and the words so that they are no longer sort of foreign or odd on your tongue, or foreign and odd movements in your arms and legs, but there's something that is a sort of natural expressive performance. It provides such a different form of engagement with that story, with that history, and it can be deployed in so many flexible ways to make use of that history. And it's those kinds of things which I think are lacking in the view of cultural heritage as something that we can purely observe as performed by a written book, or by a set of robots, or even by just a video recording. So it's about the modes of engagement, modes of expression. Yeah.
And I'll just quickly jump in to say, I mean, of course, there are other archival programs. We refer to a couple in the paper of trying to preserve certain words and certain visual documentation of performances. Of course, a lot of hakas were potentially lost, right, in the period in which it was not safe, not appropriate, not allowed to be performing and learning the skills. But I think this case makes it really clear that there's no canonical version of any one haka, even where we do know about the particular year, the particular composer of a haka. It's not that that's the original one against which all performances subsequently are measured. I mean, this is true for other ephemeral art forms too, but it's really clear in this case that there are still standards for performance. There can be good and bad performances, but they're measured in the present, in relation to the entire history of performance. So preservation is not by archiving. I mean, nothing wrong with notating. I mean, it's interesting, right? But it's not a means of producing or reproducing the performance itself.
Well, thank you for those responses. I mean, we can come back to this question of what, if anything, is the role indeed of any form of notating, encoding, transcribing, or etc. in preservation of cultural practices. But I want to go to the other folks here. So Zuzanna and Andrzej, please go ahead.
Hi, may I be some sort of like expert of dance, let's say. But I think Dor, what you said, is like a core of the preservation of dance in general. Like in dance, we had all sorts of troubles with preserving it, and with right now we are trying to like discover again how it looked like before we could record it. And this is a huge trouble. And all this label notation and all the other notations, they were very not good enough to really preserve the core of the dance. We can some sort of like do the steps, but we don't know how it looked really like. So this is actually a huge problem for dance, a huge like problem, the general theme of dance, that we cannot really preserve it. And at the same time, when you record it, it's something else. You know, I think it's in this this core that when you record it or when you put it to the robot, it's not really the same dance. It's not Haka. And for me, when I see the now dancing Haka, it's not Haka anymore, because also I think it would be very interesting if we see the robot that is designed to dance Haka, so has all the features and the look and so on. Maybe we would have a little bit different feeling about it, because, well, now it's not designed for Haka. Now it comes from a very different culture. Now it's meant to be cute, to be kawaii. Yes, it's designed to be kawaii, I guess. So I think this creates something very different. From my perspective as a dancer, it creates something very different. It creates a totally different performance, but I wouldn't call it a Haka. And I have a question about, like, pretty technical one, how the Haka is taught. taught? Like, do you have like a tribal teacher lessons staff, or is it just taught by watching and being part of a performance?
Yeah, so great question. Haka can be taught. Basically, Māori culture is organized in a tribal system. There are iwi, or sort of large tribal structures. There are hapu, which are sort of extended whānau, family ties. And then there are whānau, which are extended families. And so each hapu, iwi have haka that are specific to their regions and histories that all vary based on those histories, different features, different stories, different language, different dialects, I would say. And so typically, if you grow up in the family region, in the mara, in the rohe, you will learn a particular form of haka in very early childhood, all the way up through. These days, Māori occupy all kinds of spaces around the world, throughout New Zealand and Australia. And so kapa haka is actually embedded in the education system in New Zealand. So kapa haka is a combination, is a sort of a mixture of traditional and contemporary Māori cultural performances. It involves songs and action dances, as well as weaponry and sort of oration. But haka is a key item within that space. And kapa haka is as what I would consider is the driving force behind preservation in the current age, because it is a space which cultivates and develops performance ability as well as composition ability. And so haka are composed within the space of kapa haka, which address issues that are contemporary and modern and respond to the concerns of the day, but it is inculcating or developing the ability to perform haka and to compose haka, and then those skills can be performed in other contexts outside the festival stage where haka are required. And so it's about learning specific historic haka, as well as just the overall ability, the sort of strive for excellence in performance of all kinds of cultural performances within Te Ao Māori, within the Māori world. So yes, you learn from specific skilled kai haka, which are expert practitioners. The Māori world is full of experts in specific areas of knowledge, and there are expert haka practitioners. Yeah.
And it is worth stressing for people who aren't familiar with the culture and education in Aotearoa New Zealand how pervasive the kapa haka skills are now. And any child growing up in Aotearoa New Zealand, of whatever ethnic background, white, Pākehā, Asian, New Zealand, and Maori kids, they do the haka together, and which is why it's so extraordinary to see images of whole huge school groups at the funerals of masters, or the children from all of the high schools in Christchurch in the wake of the terrorist attack in Christchurch a few years ago, just spontaneously coming up. They know their city's haka, and it's from the point of view of countries like Australia and many other parts of the world where colonial injustice has not been acknowledged at all. Basically, it's an extraordinary, there's still a lot of issues, but this is one very practical, on the ground, educationally relevant way in which the kids move together all the time.
Thanks, Mac and John, for those responses. Zuzanna, Andrzej, I see you've lowered your hand. All right, I'll take that as you received some response. Let's go over to Raul, please.
Thank you. So, for me, one of the main messages of the paper is that technological matters is not just about technology. So there's much more there that you cannot solve just by programming or trying to do some engineering, and it's all a pervasive problem, in all artificial intelligence or self-driving cars or that kind of stuff. And I think at that moment of development of the robots, they cannot compete against a documentary or some images at that point. But yeah, after a while, I keep wondering about if the robots in the future could be good enough to convey some of the Haka there. And for me, one of the key aspects is also in the point that is making the paper, that the Haka, it's about the conversation between an audience and performers. So a question or just a commentary for the authors. Do you think, for instance, in the future, if the robots are so good in their movements and they're like kind of humanoids and they can mimic the movements of the dancers and all that, if the audience have dance Haka by themselves, the reception of the movements are going to be, I assume, that's a hypothesis, different from people that haven't done the Haka, you know? So for an audience that they don't need the experience of Haka, if you see humans doing the Haka, maybe you get this feeling, even if you haven't danced. But with the robots, still, with those in the audience that have danced, maybe they have very, very similar experiences. So it's not only about the performance, it's about the audience that is getting the feedback or this, you know, and this can have implications for the preservation, I mean, the project that they want to put, you know, because maybe older people that they cannot move, but they have these robots and they can be helped by the robots and they can explain something, even though the elders, they cannot do the movement. But for me, I mean, just the robots wouldn't do the work, but maybe they could help humans. So human machines interaction would be the good fit for the project. I don't know what you think about these remarks. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed from the start, well, what would it be apart from the technical improvements that would be needed? And as Max said, there's got to be the cultural setting and embedding, and as you stressed, the audience. I mean, and as Max said, there has to be a cultural point to the practice, and maybe we can imagine such a thing, you know, but it's a little bit hard. Like, is it, I mean, the same issues often arise in a sense with certain human performances, right? It's not obvious that there's an appropriate kind of intercultural or interpersonal connection with some human performances. So when touring musicians go around New Zealand, there have been some controversies. Certain musicians kind of get their stage crew to the local stage crew to perform a Haka and film it, and like, this is so amazing. In other cases, there's a much more spontaneous interaction. Beyonce's stage crew notoriously spontaneously performed a Haka for her, to which she kind of performed back. And there was some controversy about whether this was appropriate, but I think, Mac, that the general consensus was that the Ihi, Wehi, and Wana were sort of appropriate there, that there was some very clear meeting, right, at an embodied level of people who knew each other, who'd been on tour with each other through the country. So some of the same issues arise, right, even where you're just looking at interhuman performance.
Yeah, no, that's right, John. And thanks for the sort of question or proposal. I think we've typically, you know, we've looked ahead to what it would be like if robots were humanoid, and, you know, the kind that you see in Westworld and all of that. Kapa Haka is a good example, right? Because there are touring Kapa Haka groups which have go around the world, and they'll have this, it's typically an entertainment bracket, they'll call it, where they will use the vehicle of Haka to entertain and educate unfamiliar audiences. And so the Kapa Haka group is performing a Haka for the purpose of entertaining and educating an audience by sharing this cultural performance, sharing these particular stories with people. But either side of that particular performance context is the setup that this is a entertainment bracket. We're sharing this particular story with you. We're sharing this version of ourselves. And so that performance context of a haka is quite different to the uses of haka outside of kapa haka, outside of a festival stage, outside of an entertainment bracket. Haka, the fiery breath, is a tool that is available to Māori to express something in the moment that needs expressing, or it is embedded in a particular protocol which achieves something on multiple levels. So if you were to, for instance, visit a marae, which is a sort of a Māori community centre, there's a meeting place. There are protocols for how you enter that space because there are cultural considerations for the reception of visitors to a region and the duties and responsibilities of the people that are from that region for welcoming. And haka can be performed in that context, as it historically has been, as a way of both acknowledging and addressing and meeting the arriving people whose intentions may not be fully known just yet, but it is also an expression of identity because the particular people from that space have a particular style and version of haka. And there are things revealed in the performance and things felt in the performance which tie into ancestry, which tie into acknowledging the people that are coming, and it's doing something energetically in that space. And so that's haka. The kapa haka entertainment festival stage, the way it works to preserve is less about spreading and entertaining and educating unfamiliar or foreign audiences as it is about developing the skills of the performers themselves so that they can haka when they need to haka. And so that is how sort of kapa haka works as a preservation skill, by developing the skills of the performers and creating a sort of space in the contemporary world for them to perform and occupy. But yeah, perhaps, you know, when robots can, you know, they look like us and can move and speak and chant and stomp, maybe they can perform a version of a similar entertainment bracket, like that might be a thing, but I would still question whether that is the haka that we're trying to preserve here. Yeah.
Thanks, Mac. I see there are 8 hands up and just under 40 minutes left. So if I did the math right, that's just under 5 minutes per person to ask and receive. So let's see if we can somehow do that, the impossible. Go ahead, Zuzanna.
Oh no, quite a constraint, Dor. Thanks. Good. Thank you so much. And hi to Yono. I missed the introduction. So my question, it's really about, it's a follow-up question about the role of or connection between cultural embeddedness and learning. So I really appreciate the paper for it being clearly about the skill performance that's culturally embedded. And it made me think of a sporting practice that is culturally embedded, like Aikido. And my colleague that I'm working with, Zuzanna and Andrzej, she actually has a chapter 6 in exactly that volume that Yono advertised on Aikido as a culturally embedded sport. And now my question is this. So not just skill performances, it seems, but sporting practices seem to be defined by and embedded in cultural practices, right? I think it would be fair to say that we're always starting with a practice and the acquired skills are defined on the condition of the field. So they're going to be culturally embedded right from the beginning, maybe. So I wonder if you would agree with that, or if that's a bit of a, maybe too strong of a claim. But I guess I was thinking about that and contrasting something like learning in a sport, learning of a somersault in gymnastics or a right hook in boxing, which are very specific kind of movements, let's say, Whereas if we look at the sport as such, it's culturally embedded, right? And you said that in the Haka, in this specific performance, there are no just mere movements, right? We have to look at the movements within this, with this history and the context. And I think that's absolutely right. Which leads me to the question about I guess about learning. So would you say that there are specific sport or skilled performances that are really culturally embedded, like Haka and Aikido, and some are not? And that's why in those that are not embedded, we can learn these specific movements. And if all sporting or skilled performances are really embedded and enculturated, right? How can we explain this decontextualized, deculturalized way of learning in sports? Okay, thanks.
Shall I go first? Great. Thanks, Zuzanna. Great to see you too. I'll try to be really brief. It's a great question. I mean, there are some obvious differences, like the unique history and tie to the land and the particular people in an indigenous practice like this. But to get to the spirit of your question, right, maybe there are some more closed sporting activities which are completely transportable, right, across settings, both across places and where that whole idea of the performance environment is to reproduce exactly the same. I mean, these are sports, like closed sports that I don't know so well, things like gymnastics or synchronized swimming, perhaps some forms of rowing even. Of course, in practice, the environment can change things, but in other sports, like the ones I like, cricket, for example, is an open sport, or baseball, where the conditions make a huge difference. And the whole point is that there is no simple, reproducible atomic movement that will go the same each time. Maybe there are sports in which that is possible, and that's a really interesting case. If so, there are kinds of sport that are a little bit more like dance, cultural dance and movement traditions, and there are others which are a bit less like that.
Yeah, I would agree. Great question. To do with the openness of particular sporting contexts, I'm a big fan of mixed martial arts, and the history of martial arts is an interesting case in this regard, because you'll have traditional styles, traditional schools such as Aikido, but once globalization happens, once you start expanding and sort of, the whole idea of mixed martial arts is that you can have a kickboxer fight a wrestler, and then in that exchange, the strengths and weaknesses of both are sort of exposed, and they sort of reconfigure into something different and new to overcome the gaps and the difficulties of that. And it comes into all kinds of dimensions, degrees of freedom about particular bodies, particular speeds and strengths, and particular strategies, and all of those considerations have particular schools that have been preserved as particular martial arts. But when, I guess, one way of thinking about it, when the art sort of transforms into a sport that is open and competitive, and there's another goal other than the expression of a particular tradition, it opens it up to become something new, and innovation occurs all the time, and language changes to meet the new demands of the context that it's conducted in. So, but yeah, great space to be thinking in, I think, the sporting and culture and competition. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you both so much. I just thought it really opened up for me, thinking about the contrast between all these martial arts that have their own cultures, histories, and then MMA, right, which seems to be like just throwing all the best moves and kicks. And now can we start talking about its own MMA culture, because that's already been developing? These are great questions, so thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, Zuzanna. Okay, how are we doing for time? Not that great. Over to Corey, please.
Yeah, so I had a question about composing Haka, which might connect with some of the themes that have come up. And so like, let me walk back to the source, where my sense was that the robot Haka was an error at the axiological level, partly because it was a category error, where it was misunderstanding what was to be preserved and thinking about the thing that was being preserved as an object or as an externalizable thing, something that could be reified and therefore described and therefore transmitted and then taken from a lifeless form to a life form. Whereas in fact, if you understand it as a practice, so instead of thinking about it as a noun, you think about it as a verb, that it's much harder to make that mistake. But then, so like now I come to composing, where when I mentioned that we do a lot of emergent composition where there isn't a choreographer, but there at the end of an interaction, there is a choreography. So instead of talking about composition, we tend to talk about composing. So instead of the noun, the verb. But that said, it still is, it's very easy to fall into a trap of like Western originality of that there is somebody's vision that is active and is shaping the action of a group of performers. The way you describe kind of forming a shared through repetition and synchrony, there's some other image of composition that would be I think very valuable to understand both intrinsically, but also if you wanted somebody to, like if you used ethnography of composition to understand what kind of tool support might be useful, or what is the challenge in in people starting to move from participant to composer, what do they encounter both as a support to preservation and as just understanding the mechanism better, so that we're better at not making category errors.
Yeah, great questions. So I think the noun verb distinction is useful. And I guess just to put their category error in context, basing it on the All Blacks, the rugby team Haka, is understandably confusing. I think Haka in sport is a confusing business in itself. So to give a quick background of the role of Haka in rugby, in particular in sport, the first touring native rugby team, as part of their agreement to tour to the UK and play rugby matches against folks there, was to provide some cultural entertainment, some cultural education along the way. And so they would perform Haka, but the Haka facing the crowds, facing the audience as a sort of cultural presentation. Over time, it sort of evolved and new Haka were introduced. So Kamate began being popular as rugby culture sort of evolved and moved as well. The performance of Haka was maintained in certain contexts for the All Blacks, but as fewer Māori were involved in that, particularly after post-war years and cultural losses were rife, the performance of Haka itself was actually fairly lackluster. I'm sure you can find on YouTube there are footage from the 70s, and the All Blacks are just hopeless at their Haka, and it's really an uninspiring event. But again, still, it's facing the audience, and it's a kind of pre-game show. It wasn't until a particular Māori person was in the team at the late 70s, early 80s, and they were like, well, if we're going to do Haka, we're going to do it right. And so that means practicing it, training it, learning what it's about. And that sort of inspired this new wave of Haka, where it became, a much more of a central feature of those games. They started facing the opposite team. They started, really getting into the performance, demonstrating it. And, the TV productions have really, spotlighted it and amplified it. And it's the analogy between the Haka on the battlefield and the Haka on the rugby field is clear and obvious for people. Even though the Haka that's performed on a battlefield looks quite different than what the Haka on the rugby field looks like. It involves weapons, there's jumping, and it's really intense stuff. Even though you can say the rugby Haka is intense, it's a different variety still. The Haka that they're performing in rugby is a ceremonial haka. It's a taparahi, it's called. And the idea is that it's a haka you perform before doing something important to get your self in the right frame of mind, to energize yourself before you do something. So they explain it as a challenge. But if you sort of, just snip out the before and the after of that performance, it sort of makes sense that you can plant that in a robot performance and put on a stage in itself, and people can look at it and engage and learn about haka. To get onto composition and composing, today that really comes out of the kapa haka space, because composition is constantly happening in response to the events of the world. For example, during COVID, we've had border closures between here in New Zealand. There's one instance where a rugby league team was stuck in Australia and they couldn't get back to New Zealand. And so a haka was composed addressing that situation, which was really a sort of call for unity and rallying around, hey, COVID's forcing us to stay apart, to keep our distance. It's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term benefit. Takes strength, takes courage, we're with you. All those kinds of themes come through in this haka. Even in that space, it makes reference to actually the kamate haka, so a well-known haka, because the story of kamate is celebration of life and the triumph of life over death. It recounts a specific story of a time when Tarau Paraha is a chief from Ngāti Toa. He was evading capture from a neighboring tribe that were pursuing him, and he was sort of allowed to hide in this potato pit and evaded capture and certain death. And the story of his composition of that haka is that while he was hiding in the pit and the pursuing warriors were sort of going past him, he's sitting there thinking like, am I going to die? Am I going to live? What's going to happen to me? And then as he's emerging out of the dark potato pit, he's taking steps up, and he's into the light that shines. And so that is poetically expressed as a sort of allegory from stepping from darkness into light, the light that still shines because I'm alive and I've overcome this particular threat. That theme clearly has a lot to resonate with in a sort of post-colonial New Zealand, where cultural losses, language losses, haka itself were so suppressed that they were in real risk of being lost. And so kamate, even though it's the most well-known haka because the All Blacks perform it and everybody knows it and they hear it, they think of the haka. Why it's so popular is because the celebration of life and the theme of the triumph of life over death is so important and potent in today's society that it makes sense to perform that one, as much as we can. And so in that composition for the COVID haka, they make reference to that particular line. They also include sort of, it's called a whakatoki, which is a tribal saying. And so composition weaves together historical references within the sort of Māori cultural history in response to contemporary issues of the day. And the language and the style will vary depending on where the person is from and what they intend to do with the performance. In learning it, there's a whole another range of practices or processes that we go through, some modern, some old, or traditional. Yeah. I can talk more, but there's limited time.
Mac, just in response to Corey's really good question about how people transfer from the role of participating to composing, the group you were working with, am I right that the new haka that you guys worked on were written by the leader? They were not sort of obviously improvisatory or collaborative in the composing process, is that right?
That's right, to a degree. So particularly the words were composed by a single person because they were responding to a specific issue. But then the actions, I guess, evolved over time to fit the level of the group and to fit the needs of the performance context. This is a kapa haka kapa, so they were trying to convey a particular story. And in learning this Haka, which was quite long, I guess the actions changed over time to fit the needs of the performance. So there's things like that which factor in. I guess there are duos or small groups that compose together. I think it's probably more typical that a single person would compose a Haka and would get feedback and collaborate with others to develop it. But typically it'll be similar to like a composition of a poem. They'll go line by line and compose it that way. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much, Corey, for that question about composition. I really want to hear at least thoughts from the folks here. So elevator pitches, please. Go ahead, Zach. Wait, we cannot hear you, Zach.
Thank you. Yes, an important part of what you're discussing is about the connection between the audience and the performers. And I'm curious about the learning for the performers. It seems to me it would be much easier to learn the movements than it would be to learn how to make those connections happen. It doesn't come just from the movements. It's a two-way communication process. In modern education circles, it would be social and emotional learning, right? So how is that taught within the culture? It's part of the enculturation of the performers. And then, of course, the audience has their own process of learning. They have to learn how to play their side in the dialogue. Is there anything that you know about that's formal in relation to that kind of learning? Not learning the movements, but learning what isn't the movements.
Yeah, so there is, particularly in the Kappa Haka space, if you're performing a specific Haka, there's something about the attitude of the Haka. So a particular story will require a particular kind of attitude and a particular kind of expression. And that can often be the more difficult part to step into. Always with Haka, the words come first. So you learn the words and you then support them with the actions. The words can often be the sort of, there's a cadence, there's a rhythm, there's a cadence to how you recite the Haka. And that is then supported by the actions which you match to them. But the whole thing really comes together when it's got the appropriate attitude. And typically the attitude will either be connected with or inspired by a particular god, a particular atua. And sometimes, depending on the story that you're trying to convey, it requires you to sort of step in and embrace that attitude, which is what ihi will be connected with the ahuatanga, it's called, but the attitude that you're trying to inhabit whilst conveying the particular message of a particular Haka. Other times it'll be more personal because you're expressing your either tribal identity or your personal identity, depending on the needs of that particular performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, and that's all about the expressive aspect of the performer, but I'm interested in the receptive aspect of the performer. How does the performer learn to receive and respond to the audience? Are there any specific skills that are listening skills, so to speak?
Yep.
Or observing skills that are taught?
There are. Typically, your timing has a lot to do with it. So, depending on the context, you're performing to a specific audience, and you're performing for a particular reason. And so you'll vary the timing, the tempo of the performance. You'll perhaps vary, typically Haka are led by a leader. And so they're going to set the pace and the sort of tone for the performance. And they'll alter that depending on either the recognition that a particular audience is maybe looking in a particular way, or that the audience requires something. For example, I was at something like a conference. It was a language conference, but it's got a whole set of protocols that happened on entry into this conference. And as the sort of visiting group leading a sort of procession into the hall, part of the process is that they're bringing photos and they're keeping in mind the people that have passed away since the last time they gathered. And so they're holding photos, they're thinking in mind that we're coming here and we've lost people that were here with us last time. And as they're entering a space, they're lined with and greeted by the people that are playing host for that space. And so there's a lot of noise and movement and happening. As they'll enter in, a haka will start from just behind where they're moving towards. And the intensity of that haka will escalate the closer that they get in order to create this kind of environment in which the people are hearing so much noise and commotion and receiving such energetic effect that they're able to release the grief and the sadness that they've brought along with them and acknowledge the presence of the people that they're holding in their photos and they're bringing with them. And so depending on how they approach, the responding haka party will either increase or perhaps decrease or perhaps slow. So they're constantly gauging and assessing the condition of the people that are there and responding to their needs. Perhaps if that's going very slow, you'll do another round of the haka, you'll do it again because they're taking longer than otherwise would have expected to get to the front. Or if it's the opposite, they're going quicker, maybe they'll slow it down. So it's about controlling the tempo, the dynamics, and the sort of, you're playing with attention. And so haka practitioners cultivate skills for how to recognize the attention of the audience, and they will vary their performance to achieve different effects of the audience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's go over to Jorge, and maybe, if we can just get essences and maybe the respondents also. Yeah, okay. Jorge, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. A short comment and question. I was thinking of a far-out analogy in which you think of mathematics instead of haka in the context of your paper. Now you have Greek plane geometry, which is highly ritualistic, I would say, which would be maybe a piece of cake for artificial intelligence. But contemporary mathematics, which is quite more inactive or metaphoric, this is, I think, very relevant in haka, would be a real challenge for AI. And my last comment is that too often human activities become robotic, or we end up with just hollow containers. What's your view on that? Do you think also that haka is sort of impervious to this phenomenon?
Pretty much, yeah. And of course, we're interested in making more general case that a lot of human activity is also like this, in that there's no canonical version or in remembering the past either, that remembering, cognizing, deciding are all active performances. So this is one of the ways that indigenous practices can talk back to us. And absolutely agree with you that humans, we can make ourselves become robotic and mechanical some of the time, but that's always an incomplete transformation, right? We've never been modern, really.
Thank you. Over to Catherine, please. Sorry for cutting you a bit short, Jorge.
No problem. Okay. First off, my question is, who owns haka? Which is a question of the ethics of cultural heritage. So one thing I'm interested in is, who keeps these records? Who has jurisdiction over performances or acquisition? Who holds the copyright to the robot's program or to the robot's performance? And can anybody ever copyright cultural heritage? That's the first aspect. The other is, what has to get preserved to count as preservation? And that raises this question that many of you have been addressing, Corey especially, the question of distributed agency or distributed affect. You're not able and this particular practice vividly exhibits this. You're never able to locate individual movements, individual acts as if they were issuing from some interiorist space out into the world. It's always interaffective, and it's always intercorporeal, and it's always distributed. So the question, in a way, would be, it would be more illuminating to ask, what can any given technology preserve, and what can it not preserve? And you know, is there something film can do that that lab notation can't do? Is there something that master dancers' bodies cannot preserve that could get preserved in other technologies? What are they good for? For instance, in the case of technologies, one of the old things about Homeric literature, for example, which wasn't literature, is oral tradition, which a whole bunch of guys wrote down later, not some guy named Homer, but that doesn't matter. It at once froze something and saved something, which is always the case. It made it unmalleable. Oral tradition or oral practices, embodied traditions, are always, on the one hand, deeply embedded in their present time. They're responsive to their context of being. But when you inscribe something, it has a durability, it loses flexibility, but it has durability. And yet, as everyone pointed out, the manuscripts, the textualized versions, are themselves fragile in different ways. They're unreliable, they break, they get lost. Nobody figures out where they are. So you know, you want to decide between resisting decay and memorability or embeddedness in culture. It's it's very complicated, but and you might think, this is my last idea here, that making the robots more humanoid would be a good idea, because then they'll be more like a master teacher. But then that raises the problem that Dora suggested of the uncanny valley. I mean, there's this great Masahiro Mori, who invented the term, said that robotic humans are unproblematic as long as the robots are not too humanoid. If they become too humanoid, they arouse disgust, revulsion, and unease.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So Kamate is copyrighted. It's owned by the ancestors of the tribe of Taraiparaha. That's Ngāti Toa. And it's copyrighted because that particular haka has been described as the most performed, the most maligned, the most abused of all haka, because it's popularized by the All Blacks. Today you can see the kamate performed around the world in all kinds of different countries and contexts by folks that appreciate the energetic effects and the sort of liveliness that are achieved by it, but would have very little understanding of the words, the history, or the story. And so that tribe has copyrighted that because that is the legal context in which we exist at the moment. Historically, haka were known by the tribe that that inherited the haka, and it's typically always connected with the composer, and the story that it tells is connected with the particular event. And through that haka, it's another layer of learning that history that's important to the tribe. There would be individuals that are somewhat experts that would know other tribes' haka, so that they could, understand their history, their genealogies, their stories. And so it's a version of a sort of a historical or non-literary specialist, right? It's knowing history through the different forms. But you raise a good point about, if we are going to offload or program robots to haka, what happens to the sort of copyright there? Who owns that performance? How do they manage that in perpetuity? Part of the robotology proposal invited us to think about a future in which a sort of far future Star Trek style anthropologist maybe comes back to Earth and no humans are around, and they just find this robot and it can perform this Haka. And their suggestion was that through the robot's performance of Haka, they would have a good idea of the cultures that existed and the things that they did. And so, you know, I think of that context and play out that thought experiment and wonder what they would learn without the rest of the, you know, context of human life on Earth. What would they gauge and learn from that robotic performance of Haka? On the one level, they would appreciate that, okay, there's this movements and there's this sort of loud and energetic exchange or activity that these people engage in. Would they feel something in response? Maybe not, because they exist in their own, you know, history of feeling. I don't know. Would they? So to build on that, part of the difficulty of language in Haka and the language Te Reo Māori in general is that it's highly contextual, and so language in Haka is also highly metaphorical. The sort of metaphors and the analogies that it draws on, highly specific to Aotearoa New Zealand. The birds there are particularly important, the particular landscapes and the particular events that have happened on particular places all factor into the stories of particular Haka. If you were to just read the lyrics translated, and you know, even if you were just to read the lyrics of a Haka, most people would have a very difficult time. I would certainly have a very difficult time of understanding what the Haka is about. It's not until it's performed in context that you realize, oh, okay, I understand what this is about now. And so that's part of the difficulty, that is Haka exists in moments, it's very contextual, and how you feel in response to it will tell you a lot about what is happening. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys, for that question. Simon, Zuzanna and Andrzej have agreed that you go first. Thank you, Zuzanna.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you, and thank you so much for this great presentation, Mac and John. And of course, got about a million things to say about robotics, but we can talk about that another day. I stuck something in the chat about the idea of calling Haka dance, and that was a little ill-formed. But what I think I'm calling for is that we ought to be reflective about the nature of cultural practices or the formation of cultural practices in late capitalism, which has the effect of washing out cultural meaning or integration, you know, out of cultural practices. So that's what bothered me about referring to Haka as dance. I want to tell, because I'm last, I'll tell a little story. A friend of mine who was a documentary filmmaker was in the Central Desert in Australia, documenting the famous Western Desert painters in the 1970s. Some of you might know of this work. And there was one of those painters, a man by the name of Uta Jangala, who was, you know, sitting under a tree with flies flying around, and he's painting one of these dot paintings with the paints that he'd been provided, which was a transference of a sand painting tradition in the Western Desert. And these paintings are cosmological maps, as those of us who know about this stuff know. They're just profoundly rich, you know, lived experiences and cosmologies and stories. And Uta pointed to the painting that he was making, and he said to Russell, "White man call him art." And it was just such a great joke, right? Because it's like what he was doing makes, you know, most of Western art look trivial.
Yeah.
So
with that story, we are really coming to the official end of our time. And what I'll do is we can hang on out here for those who wish, but don't want to keep anyone else. So what I'll do is I'll just officially, formally thank Mac and John for the paper and for the presentations today and for responding to all of these wide and broad and deep questions.
Thanks, everybody. Terrific.
So fantastic. Right. So with this, I'll switch off the recording now, and anybody who wishes to stay on, please do. And otherwise, I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.